little more about permissions. So there is another command called sudo, which stands for substitute user do. So essentially, like I said, as a user, I may not be allowed to do certain things, but a super user, which is a root, can actually do everything in the computer. So you cannot change permissions for the super user, but you can create user accounts and you can give specific permissions to those user accounts. But what if you are logged in as a user and you want to do something for which may require user permissions, right? You should ideally not be asked to log out of your account and then log in as root and then do what you want to do. There should ideally be some way where even within your account, you should be able to do what super user can do without logging off from your account. And that is what this command helps you. So for example, if I say go to my terminal and there is some file in say etc folder called sudoers, which essentially tells me who all have sudo permission. So which all users have this sudo permission. And I just want to see who all have this permission. So ideally as a user, I should not be allowed to do it. So if I try to access this, because I am not the root user, the system doesn't allow me to actually read this file. The command cat, what it does is it essentially just reads the file and prints whatever are the contents of that file on the terminal itself. So I just want to print whatever are the contents of sudoers on this terminal itself. And when I try to do that, the system didn't give me permission. So one option is that I log out and I log in again as a root user. But another option is that I do the same command by just saying sudo in the front. So what it will do is it will then ask me for the root password. So then if I just put in the root password, then it will execute that command. And usually once I execute the sudo command first, it stores the sudo password for about there's a specified time that you can change also, but typically it stores for about 10 to 15 minutes, such that now onwards for next 10 minutes, if I just want to even access anything that the root user has, it will not ask me for the password again and again. It will just give me all the root permissions for the next 10 minutes.
So can the root user sign up?
No, so I actually haven't signed in as a root. All I have done is I have executed a command as a root user, but I still am asked about the root password, but I never went into the root user. There is a difference. I have never, when I execute the sudo command, I am not logging into as a user, telling the system that look, I know the root password, so let me execute what a super user could execute even from within my account. So this is my way of telling the computer that please give me permissions to access this file.
So that's okay. So but you said that you stay for 15 minutes, so next 15 minutes you write a command, won't ask you for a password. What if you are actually leaving, and you want the thing?
So you can change those settings that it will not store your password also. So by default it does store, but you can change the settings to not store it also. So is everybody clear about what sudo command does?
Like you said, it will be activated for next 10 to 15 minutes. Is there any command that after doing your work you can end that?
Yeah, so you can change the configuration time. So I think then I can talk about another thing. All the commands in the computer, if you want to see how do you execute those commands or what all options that command comes with, the best way to do it is there is another command called man. So man stands for manual. So if you want to see what all options sudo command has, you just say man sudo. Then it is just a text file which you can read through to say that what all options it gives. You may log in into sudo with some other username, or you may give some authentication types and all. So essentially each command has a lot of options. And when you just don't give any of those options, the description also tells that what is the default option. So some of these options are there by default that even when you don't call for them. So that's what I did when I said ls minus l. I actually gave minus l as an option. So I told the command ls that you should execute by giving me some file permissions also, and not just the listing of files in the current directory. If you're not clear about how to use any command, you can just type man and then the command name and then you can just see the whole description of how to use that command. If I want to see what -i does, I just go down, or I can type \-i, and then it will take me directly to, so -i just says that -i is simulating the initial login. So you don't have to learn what -i, -l does. All you need to learn is that sudo gives you root permissions. Now you can go to the man page of of sudo and just see what all options you need. And the description says that -i will simulate the initial login as if the user and runs the shell specified in the program of the user that the command is being run as. So essentially be very similar to as if you have logged in as a root user. So / is for searching in this description. So instead of going all the way down, and I'll talk about how do you do searching in these things as well. So this is just a small cartoon essentially to again illustrate what sudo can do. I mean, this guy says make me a sandwich. Is it like the other guy says make it yourself? And then he issues that command with sudo and the other guy agrees to make a sandwich. So this is what I was saying. So every command in Linux has some options and has some arguments, right? And to find these options and arguments, you have to go to the man page. So you just say man and then the command name, and then you will see all the options and all the arguments, right? Now the question comes that how do I execute multiple commands one after another? One way we have already studied is to create a shell script that I write each of these commands on a different line in a shell script and then I execute it. What I can also do is on the terminal itself, I can execute these commands separated by semicolon. So for example, if I say ls, it prints this, and if I say ls and then I say ls -l, then if I go up, it would have first executed ls. See, it first executed ls and then it executed ls -l. So it first executed ls, then it finished, and the finishing is told by semicolon. When you just separate out each command by semicolon, the terminal itself takes one command one at a time and keeps on executing it. So you can type in as many commands as you want, but each of them will automatically execute. So it will not stop after each command. It will just keep on executing unless you have made it stop. And remember, by this colon, each command is independent. So I type one command, I type second command, the second command has nothing to do with the first command. So even in a shell script, you may write multiple commands, one on each line, or you may write all the commands in the same line separated by this semicolon, right? Or you may not even write a shell script at all and you write many of these commands. But typically when you are using multiple commands, you actually want to see the output of the commands, right? Or there is another thing that you would like to do, that you may want to pass this output as input to the next command. So typically you would like to do at least one of the two, right? So that also is something that you can do. For example, if I want to count how many files or directories are in my current directory, so one way is that I just type ls and then I keep on counting. There is another command called word count, which if I go to the manual page, what it says is that the word count gives me number of words, lines and characters in whatever I give it as an input. So what I can do is, or I can only say -l, and -l will give me number of lines in each input file. So I know that when I type ls -l, each of the files and directories is on a separate line. Now I just type ls -l and I give that as input to wc -l, and it told me that the number of lines in ls -l is 25. The way that you give output of one command as input to another command is by using this thing called pipe. So if I say ls -l and pipe it to wc, it will give me number of lines, number of words, number of characters. But all I am interested in knowing is what is the total number of files and directories in the current directory. So I just say that ls -l and then WC minus L. WC minus L only gives me number of lines. So it only prints this 25, right? So now I know that, okay, the number of files/directories in the current directory is 25. One has to be careful because, so if I just type ls minus L, so if I go up, if you actually see the output of ls minus L, the first line actually tells you total 136. So this has nothing to do with number of files or directories, right? So if you're counting just the total number of lines, you should subtract 1 if I want to know how many files and directories are in the current directory. So if I just tell you that write a shell script to count the number of files or directories in the current directory, all you need to do is to first do ls minus L, pipe it to word count minus L to get that number 25 and then subtract 1 from it and then print it out that the total number of files and directories in the current directory is 24. The output of ls minus L is all these lines, right? Now with word count minus L, I'm counting all the number of lines. But the first line doesn't represent any file or directory. The first line just says total, it just says something. So this is not what I'm interested in knowing. So that's why I should subtract 1. So when you're passing the output of one command as input to another, you should be aware of what the output of the command is essentially. So these are broadly two different ways of executing multiple commands. So one way is that each command is independent of one another, right? So there you just write each command on a separate line, or you separate out each command with a semicolon. Another way is if you want to make the commands depend on each other. So the output of one command should go as input to the other. For example, if I want to see who all are logged in currently, right? So then I can type who, which is a command which tells me which all users are currently logged in, and I just pipe it to WC minus L, and it will give me the total number of users that are currently logged in into my machine. So then it will just count the number of lines, right? But if you really have to do it, then one way is that if I just type ls, I know that each entry in this, each word in this is either a file or a directory. Then I should instead look at number of words. So I should type word count, and then the number of words in this input is 24, which is actually the number of files and directories.
24 lines.
Yeah, so then it may be the case that, while printing it is actually printing this way, but that's something that the shell, that the terminal itself is doing, but the actual true printout is that each of these is actually on a separate line. Right, so the terminal is displaying you this way, but actually the output of command ls is actually, so if it's saying that it's 24 lines, then it is actually indeed 24 lines. So that is another way of ensuring that whatever gets displayed on the terminal may not be the exact output of that command. Usually that is the case. It's one of the rare cases where what you see on the terminal is not the exact output of that command.
What do you tell about the order? Is it lines?
So lines, words, and then number of characters. So if you count each character, it will come out to about 266. So you don't need to memorize what each of these represent. All you need to know is that there's a command called WC, which can count the number of lines, number of words, number of directories. Then what all each of them represent, you can actually go to the man page of WC and then see. So let's go through some of these commands. So I'll type in those that at least one person in the class doesn't know. So do you know what is mkdir? Make directory, right? rm is remove. Rm minus rf is you are forcefully removing a given thing. What does ls do? List, right? cd means, and pwd, present working directory. So cp means copy, so I'll copy one file to another. mv means move, so the previous file will not exist and it will be changed to a different name. And again rm is the remove. If I have to do file management, cat essentially prints out all the contents in a file. So this is the content of that file that I wanted to print out, which is in /etc/sudos, and when I say cat, it prints out all the complete file on the terminal. Now if I want to print out only say the last 5 lines, then there's a command called tail. Tail would print the last few lines, right? So if I have to print out say the last 5 lines, I say instead of cat, I say tail minus 5. And if you see, these 5 lines are same as these 5 lines. So tail minus 5 will print the last 5 lines of that file. And similarly, if I have to print the first 5 lines, so head minus 5 will print the first 5 lines, tail minus 5 will print the last 5 lines. So sort essentially just sorts it out for you, right? So I can actually, again, let's try to use pipe here and then do the sorting. So if I just say ls, it actually is automatically sorted out. The cat command, you can give certain options that you want to print this line to this line, right? So if you go to the man page of cat, it actually has an option to allow you to print from starting line to finishing line. So you can give those line numbers and you can print from there. I have a file called backup rsync. If I do a cat on that file, it just prints out what is inside that file. Now if I give the output of cat as input to sort, what it is essentially printing is, it is sorting out all these lines, right? So it first prints out all the empty lines, then it prints out the lines which start with some special characters. Then if you see, it prints out the lines in the order of alphabets. So D comes first, then E, then R. So this is not the same order as in this. So I can give the output of this to sort, and then the sort will essentially sort it out for me. So similarly, if I give the output of this to command unique, so what unique does is, it removes the lines which are repeated. So because there was only one line, which is the empty lines which were repeated, it removed all the empty lines and replaced it with a single empty line. And then it did it. So as an example, so now what I did was I created another file called temp.sh where I copied the first line multiple times. So I did the same command again. I said cat temp.sh and then I piped the output of this to sort. It sorted out everything for me. And now if I give this output to unique, it will remove the multiple lines. So it has removed all these multiple lines into and it has made it a single line. These are just some useful things to know, because now you can essentially take a file with many sentences, you could sort it out, or if you have a file with a few numbers, you can sort out those numbers by just giving a sort command and you don't have to manually do it. So let's come to some of the user management commands. So passwd stands for password. You can change the user password. It will ask you for your previous password and then the new password. User add, it's obvious if you want to add a new user, to use the command. User del is user delete. User mod, if you want to change the permissions of any user, you can use the command user mod to change the permissions of that user. And then similarly, you can add a group, you can delete a group, you can modify the permissions of a group. So these are just some general Linux commands which you will often come across. So I just thought I'll introduce these to you. Then another very useful command is find. For example, you want to see where a given file is. Like in Windows, there is a search button and you type in a file name and it searches. You can actually also specify which directories it should search in, right? So this is how you also do it here. So you can say find and then you specify which directory it should start from, right? Because we all know now that the directory structure is an inverted tree, right? So I can say which directory it should start from, then it should only search in that subtree. If you want it to search in the whole computer, what should you do? So your start directory should be \. Then you say minus name and then separated by space, you give the file name. For example, if you want to search for a file called readme in this directory called -home, right? And then this option is to say that if it finds a file, it should print out the path of the file also. So I am currently in /users So in Mac, instead of home, they have a directory called users. So I'm currently in /users/Amarjeet Singh. And what I said was that, so I have this file called backup.sh. What I said was that, okay, find in /users -name backup.sh and then print out. So what it did was, it said that, okay, this backup.sh is actually at this path, /users/Amarjeet Singh /backup.sh. You can also say star.sh and then it will find out all the files with that extension. So I'll come to the regular expression thing. So this all comes under something called regular expressions, right? And we'll actually have one full lab session for regular expression. Essentially, if you don't want to search for the full file name, if you want to only search for, say, all the files that start with A, or all the files that have C and L together in them, wherever in the name, right? So you can actually do very many things like this, and we will talk about how to do each one of them. So similar to find, there is also a command called locate, which doesn't go all the way and finds it, but locate uses something called a database. So when you run another command called slocate, it will actually create a database of which files are where. Then instead of going into each and every directory, what locate does is, locate just goes into the database and then finds out if there's a file in that database. If there's a file, then in that table, the file would have a corresponding path. So it just reads out that path and then prints it out. What that means is that I just run slocate once and then I create this whole table. Now, every time I have to find a certain thing, all I need to go is to actually search in that table. Instead of searching in the whole computer or in that whole subdirectory, I just search in that table. And if everything is organized in that table, right? So if, for example, everything is organized in the alphabetical order, all I need to do is to quickly go to the table. If I'm searching for, again, say backup.sh, I quickly go to the table in the entries which starts with B. And if I've already searched through all the entries that starts with B, I don't need to search through the whole table, because I know that if backup.sh doesn't exist in those entries, then backup.sh doesn't exist in the computer. So then I can actually quickly do my search if I have such a database. And this is what it does. So, but you still have to spend a lot of effort creating that table once. So similarly, if you want to see where is the command located which you are executing, then there is this command called which or where is. If I want to see where is this command ls located, I just say which ls, and then it tells me that it is executing ls from /bin/ls. So like I said, all the typical binaries of usual Linux commands are stored in /bin directory. So this is only for commands, right? So it will only search for in the bin or the sbin directory. It will not search everywhere in the computer, right? So if you want only, you can do this same thing using the find command also. That you can say find minus in starting with /bin minus name ls and then minus print. It will also do the same thing. But which is just essentially replacing the find for the commands only. It's obvious that which means that you only are searching for files or for commands. You can read the man page and then there will be something by default. If find commands has something by default, then it will start searching, say, from the root by default, right? If there is no default setting, then it will give you a error saying that you have to specify the directory, right? So many times, if I don't execute a command, for example, if I just execute which, I didn't give anything, it just came out because I didn't give any input. Many times it will actually give me an error also if I say that that command doesn't exist. For example, so I tried giving some option as ls minus z, and then because no such option existed, it said that it's an illegal option and the usage is that you use one of these options. So which will give you where is which. So which is in /sw/bin/which. Yeah, so man will give you the manual for man. Format and display the online manual pages. Yeah, so I don't have the database created, but locate actually creates some database and then it just searches in that database by running some command called slocate. So you first run a command called slocate and then you create a database. Once that command executes, now you have the database, then you can run this locate thing. If you just run this locate without this database, then it will either say that database doesn't exist or it will say that the file doesn't exist because there is no such database. So it's stored permanently, but the next time when you run it, it will increment whatever are the new files created into the database. So it's always stored permanently in that local machine. So then for system administration, so this is something you guys would have learned in the last session, cron. This is similar to when you have to program a task to run at a given time. So what you can do is you go to this, there are these files called cron.hourly, cron.daily. If you add your command to this file, then what it will do is it will just run that command every hour. So 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, every hour that command will run. If you say cron.daily, every midnight that command will run. Similarly, weekly, monthly, the start of that week. So for example, I want to back up my machine. So I don't want to back up when I am working. Right? So I can actually specify in cron.daily that okay, every midnight just back up all my data to a central server. Yeah, so you can also specify a time here, what time of the day and then daily. It will only execute at that specific time of the day, every day. So if your computer was not on at that time, if you turn it on later on, then it will wait for that time again the next day. It very blindly looks at the system time and just matches that. If the system time matches with the time that is mapped here, it will execute, otherwise it will not.
So we can have a schedule to start the computer.
So you can do a scheduled start also, boot up also, but that depends on if you can actually start the computer. I mean, if you haven't powered it off from the manual, right? So if it's powered on or it's in the standby mode, you can actually do a scheduled wake up. What if you want your file to run right now and then say 1 hour 15 minutes later and then say 4 hours later? So there is no period to it. So this is for periodic. What if you want to run your commands without any period? Then you create a file called crontab where you specify in a given format at what time and what day you want to run. Then there is another command called rsync. What rsync does is it backs up data for you. So what rsync will do is you specify the source and then you specify the destination. So I can specify that I want to back up my music folder, my pictures folder to say my external hard drive. So when I connect my external hard drive over USB port, it will appear somewhere in media for Linux. In Mac case, it appears somewhere in volumes, right? So I can actually write a script and I'll just show you. So I just run this command rsync where I specify that this is the source. Source is my desktop. And then the destination is /volumes. So when I connect my external hard drive, it appears in volumes. So /volumes, /backup, /amarjeet, /mymac. It should store all the files in the desktop to here. Right? So there are some options that you can give essentially. So some of these options that I give is that if there is a file that exists here but doesn't exist here, then copy that. If there is a file that doesn't exist here, for example, I had some files stored on my desktop the last time I backed up, but I have not deleted those files, right? So when I'm backing up, should I delete those files from the backup folder also, or should I keep those files in the backup folder? So you can specify these things through some of these commands, right? So you can go into rsync to see how you specify a given option. So what rsync intelligently does, see, you can also do a copy of these files. But when you do a copy, it will ask you that file already exists. Do you want to overwrite or not? What rsync does is, it intelligently looks at the timestamp of each file. So it sees that when was the last time a given file was modified in my current directory and in the destination directory. And if those two times are different, then that means that I have made some changes in that file. Which means that then I should copy it, otherwise I should not copy. So for example, if you have a folder where you keep on adding some files, but when you want to take a backup, your backup should be intelligent enough that it should not copy all the files all the time. So this rsync automatically takes care of it. It looks at the timestamp of last modified timestamp in your source as well as in destination, and only copies if those two timestamps are different. And then there is another command called df, which will tell me what is the empty space on each of my drives. So if I say df, it just says that my current hard disk, so how many 512 blocks do I have, how many of those blocks are used, how many of those blocks are available, and what is the overall capacity. So if I actually connect a USB drive also, it will show on another line. So the command df will tell you what are the different file systems which are here, how many 512 bytes block exist, how many of those blocks are used, how many of those blocks are available. So if you connect an external hard drive or your pen drive to it, it will also come here as say /media/Kingston, and it will show you how much is the empty space there. Right? So these are just some useful commands which, for example, if you want to know more detail, you just type in the man page and then look into the more details. Now, ping is a command to know whether your network connection is up or not. So what it does is, you give a certain host name, for example, say google.com. Ping will send some packet to that server. And if that server is also supporting the ping request, then what it will do is it will reply back with the same packet back to you, right? So whenever you send a certain packet or a certain data to some other machine on the network, that network may be your, say, local proprietary network, or that network may be internet. Then if you send it through ping, and if the other machine also supports ping, it will reply back to you with a packet. So for example, if I have a good network connectivity and I do a ping to google.com, it replies me back, and it said that the total time it took for the packet to go to google.com and then come back to me was 29 milliseconds, right? And it keeps on sending these packets and it keeps on receiving it. So this is a way for me to know, right? I mean, I just say Control C and what I can also do is I can only, for example, if I turn off my internet and then I do a ping, it says that the network is down.
Why do we get why is the time difference fluctuating by large amounts?
Because it's not the same route. So when you actually send the data is not, I'll actually show you. So let's just see, I can actually see where all it goes. See, this is, if I do trace route, it is essentially telling me where all it went. So it first went to this server called 192.168.1.1, actually because my cyber roam is not logged in, right? So when I requested for google.com, it first find out that google.com essentially means 74.125.236.114. So this is what is called IP address.
Then is it not specific to a server?
Yes, so when I say google.com, I'm actually sending a request to a server of Google, and that server sends me back that page that you see on the browser.
Well, if somebody is using the computer from somewhere else and tries to access Google, they will not get the same ping address for Google, right?
So what happens is that Google actually has many servers installed across the world. So depending on where you try to access Google from, it will query the nearest server that is there, right?
If it access IP in that browser, server.
So if you actually type this IP in the browser, it will actually take you to google.com only. So if instead of google.com, if you type 74.125.236.114, the google.com page will open up.
By seeing the IP address, can you tell where physically the server is located?
Yes, so the way these IP addresses are assigned, a lot of times, not a lot, but quite a few times, people don't follow this assignment, but usually they have a standard that servers located in India should start with this specific IP address, servers in Australia should start with this. And that's why many websites can actually give you statistics. So there are many tools which can say that if you actually host a website, they can actually on a world map point out that there were so many users from Australia that access your website. There were so many users from North America, there were so many users from South America, there were so many users from Europe that access your website. And the way to do that is actually they look at the IP address and then they map that IP address to see where that request is coming from, right? So when I say trace route, what it is doing is it actually goes to each and every hop. So for example, this is a computer here in IIIT and then there is a server somewhere. So in between this communication, it will go through multiple routers before it reaches here, right? So what traceroute does is it actually prints out all the routers in between, right? Many a times these routers don't give you the information of themselves, in which case these stars will come because they don't want you to know where all this actually goes through. I think if I do Yahoo, you can see routers in UK that gets routed through. So there are some ways. I mean, these days servers so ping request is only a small 64-byte packet. So I can respond to billions of such ping requests without. Yeah, you can. Yeah. So potentially, this is something called denial of service. So this is something called denial of service attack, that you actually make a server so busy that it cannot reply to any other request to any other user. So this is how some of the users actually do create that. For example, on a ICICI Bank platform, they may do a denial of service attack where they will keep on sending some requests such that the server cannot reply to any other user. So this is one of the types of attacks that can happen potentially in the internet. For example, these machines in between, if they don't want to, so essentially this tells that when I type for say yahoo.com, my request first went to 1.1, which is actually the router. So this is my local network. So usually local area network, it's always 1.1. So 1.1 can be multiple 1.1s, right? Then it sent this request to 1.24. So if you actually look at your CyberRoam account, your CyberRoam IP address would have 1.24, right? So that is our gateway to the outside world. So my router actually sends it to the gateway, which sends my request to the outside world. And then from this router onwards, it's going through multiple paths. But these guys are not telling their identity. So if I don't get the identity packet back, then I only print these stars. And eventually it will reach out to google.com or whatever. No, so that can also happen. See, this router can be accessed by multiple people at the same time, right? So at that time, what router does is it also creates queue of all the packets that is coming in, and then it services that packet one by one at a time. So it may happen that by the time that you are putting in that request, the router may be busy in doing something else. Or it may also happen that your subsequent requests actually go through different route, right? So this router may find that this router is busy. So it may actually send to someone else who may directly send here and then do here. So in internet, there are thousands and thousands of paths between any source and any destination. And this routing thing happens dynamically. So whenever you access google.com, it's not sure that your request will be sent through the same set of routers. So even different ping requests may go through different set of routers at different times of the day, right? And that is where, and this delay can also come in. For example, your machine is also busy, right? Your machine, besides receiving the accepted ping packets, is also doing something else. So by the time the packet comes, if your machine is busy doing something else, this tells the total time from the time the machine sends the packet to the time I actually received and read the packet. So there are delays within the machine, there are delays here, there are delays within the network. So the difference is coming from these multiple sources of delay. I think these are actual time, system time. So I mean, you can go to traceroute to actually see what. So essentially you can go into that command to find out a lot of things about what these commands were. Broadly, the traceroute command will actually give you the whole route that it took to reach out to the server, right? No, so usually by default, every time it sends to the shortest route available, right? But the shortest route may be different, right? So the definition of shortest is not fixed, right? So the shortest is not in terms of physical distance, but shortest is in terms of time. And the two servers may actually be one in Asia, one in US, and they may communicate faster than say two servers within Asia, right? So the shortest is in terms of time. This is another command that I say NSLOOKUP. So NSLOOKUP, what it tells me is that if I type any website name, say google.com or gmail.com, it tells me, so first of all, those who are doing on the port, so it actually went through, say, port 53, so you should look into what these ports essentially mean. And then it says that, okay, these are all the multiple Google servers. So 74.125.236.114.115.113.112.116. So your request may actually go at a time to any of these servers, and the google.com page could be accessed. Right? So typically when you host a website, you will only host it at one of the servers, because the number of people accessing your website is very small, right? But the number of people accessing Google is very large, and they don't want any one server to be overloaded with too many requests. So that's why they replicate their information across multiple servers, such that when there are multiple requests, if one server is busy, they can forward the request to any other server. No, so these servers are very likely to be located in India, but it may happen some services, for example, that may not be very famous in India, they may only have one server in India, say multiple servers in China, a lot more servers in US. So depending on IP address, one can potentially tell. So I don't know if 74.125 always means in India, but it's very likely that Google will have a lot of servers within India itself, because the number of users accessing Google are very large.
Can we change the port to which it is connected?
No, so usually the service, each port has a specific service that it provides. So usually the ports are fixed. So now a few commands essentially that will help you do things faster. So if you're typing, say, commands on the terminal, now you forgot which command you typed, say, a while ago. There's a file called history, where in each line it maintains the commands that have been executed. So history is maintaining the history of about 605 commands so far that have been executed, right? And I can actually give history an option that execute the command in that line number. So if you go to the man page of history, it will tell you how you can give history and then a line number option. And then it say if I can give the line number 587 to the history, and it will execute the command which.
History displays all the commands which are executed after opening this terminal.
No, up to a certain level. So it has a fixed buffer size. If that buffer size is full, then it will override the last command, and it will keep the last. Let's say it keeps the last 600 commands or so.
Can you save this history into a file?
Yes, you can save this history into a file also.
Can I modify this history? Like, can you delete any one of them?
No, so this history is the order in which you have executed the commands. You cannot modify the history. So I told you that you can forward the output of one command as an input to another command. What if you want to forward the output of a command and save it as a file, right? So then what you can do is, let's say history, you just say arrow, right arrow, and then give the name of the file. Let's say temp.txt, right? So the output of history, if I do cat of temp.txt, it actually gives me all the history. So I can forward the output of any command into a file using the right arrow as well, right? And then if I do a cat of this temp, if I do a cat of temp.txt and then I do a w count, it tells me that there are about 500. So similarly, I told you that you can actually pipe the output of one into another and then so on and so forth, right? So essentially you can actually make very complex commands. So what if you are writing many of these commands one after another, and then you want to change some command in the beginning? You either keep on typing the left arrow to go all the way or you just say Control A. Control A will take the cursor all the way to the front of the line, and Control E will move the cursor all the way back to the line. So same as home and end, but home and end button doesn't work in terminal. So I can just say that ls minus L, give it to WHO, and then give it to W count. But now I want to change, instead of minus L, I want to give minus AL. So I can say Control A and then move it here and then do minus AL, right? Or I can then do Control E and then go back to the end of the command and then I keep on typing it. So these are just few ways in which you can actually work faster. So similarly, if you want to delete part of the command, then Control K will delete from wherever your current cursor is till the end of the line, right? So for example, if I am here, I press Control K, then it will delete everything till the end of that line, right? Similarly, I can delete the previous word using Control W. So instead of deleting one character at a time, I can just keep on typing Control W and it will delete until the next white space, so which it counts as one single word. Initially, you may have to memorize some of these, but the more you start working in the terminal and the more you start using it, these will come very naturally to you. I also find that these are some ways to not just make your whole process faster, but also people looking at the screen also feel like, wow, you can move out on the screen very fast. So, I mean, just a good way to impress people also. Okay.